like and subscribe. Now. Bartenders of Reddit, what was the weirdest, craziest thing you have overheard while making someone's drink? The first restaurant bar I worked in, I was only serving, but I frequently was in the section right next to the bar. One day I was busy serving a large group, but the restaurant was mostly empty and a guy behind me at the bar said, "You wanna pet my parrot?" My initial reaction was the same as if a stranger had just come up behind me and touched my shoulders, but when I turned around, it really was a guy with a parrot on his shoulder. The parrot's name was Bobby, and yes, both me and the bartender pet him. I was a bartender for about 2 weeks, filling in for a relative who owned a bar and went on his honeymoon. I heard a guy talking to a woman about murdering her husband. I called the cops, but these patrons were gone before they showed up. This was before cameras, so I just gave my story and that was it. Not long after, my uncle calls me saying the cops are looking for me. They interview me about the couple. Apparently, the guy was a hitman for hire and the woman was trying to get some insurance money. She got busted. It was actually an episode of Forensic Files back when that was on TV. I remember watching the episode and they said something like the couple was overheard discussing the murder in a bar. I was kind of upset that they didn't mention me. Lol. I was hoping for the awesome bartender overheard them, but couldn't really tell us much. He also pointed at the male in the photo lineup and asked, "Is this him?" as if he wasn't sure. What a refined dope. We had to use forensic evidence because the eyewitness was useless. A married couple in their 50s arguing how they were going to explain the fact they couldn't pay the remainder of the €3 million bill for a Ferris wheel they'd ordered 18 months ago, already put $1 million deposit on, and whose collection was due at 8 AM the following morning. The people are here to repossess the Ferris wheel. At first I thought it was Ferrari, then I read what it actually said and everything stopped making sense. Lol. That is a story I want to hear from them directly. Sounds like a crazy ride. This happened in 2019 in Amsterdam. They were an American couple. The wheel was due to be transported under their supervision upon collection in 16 huge parts that required 3 flatbed trucks to do so. They had played along seemingly awaiting a Hail Mary solution. They didn't tip. I have so many questions right now. This one is wild, I love it. From a woman to her friend. I don't know about you, but I just can't poop in a pink bathroom. Customer speaking to his friend. "Mate, I can't believe you couldn't get it up for her. I mean, I would have just f'd the Be-Soft and use a shoehorn or something." Me. "That'll be £9. I once had to ask a woman to remove her infant from the bar top. She put them on the floor. I really don't miss bartending. Ugh, people bringing in kids. I worked at the dirtiest punk rock bar imaginable for a bit years ago. We did some trade in food, mostly vegan stuff. One brunch, this dude comes in with 2 young kids and sits down to order brunch. We tried to warn him away, but he was adamant on staying. He complained when F the Pain Away by Peaches came on the jukebox. Like, "I'm here with my kids. This is inappropriate." Yes, it is inappropriate. Where do you think you are right now? As someone that's been playing in punk bands in punk bars for about 27 years, the idea of a punk bar that has brunch is simultaneously the least and most punk thing I've ever heard, and I love it. Someone was boasting about his very small penis. Very tiny, like micro. He proceeds to lower his pants and show it to his friend. Micro flex. One of the guys at the bar recognized me. Somehow. He said he knew my mother and dropped her name. Somehow. He apparently met her at a BDSM club. Somehow. Your mom. At her BDSM club. So anyway, here are some pictures of my kid. Jesty one. Look at the pictures. Slave. These could be your children, but you can't even get your tiny little dick up. Can you? You're worthless. It's always weird the first time you meet your dad. Give it time. That reminds me of my aunt. She was a dominatrix long time ago. Man and woman is sitting at the bar. She starts crying and says, "I just want us to have something special." The guy looked her dead in the eyes and said, "We do have something special. We have sex. We are both married." 10 minutes later they are making out and she's rubbing his dick over his pants. I love slow Wednesdays. But were they married to each other? That's negative. After the makeout session I got to hear about their spouses. I had a waiter at a restaurant tell me once about this weird married couple who would come in on dates and always split the bill in half and only pay for their portion. He said he knew they were married cause they were wearing rings. I suggested they might be married to other people, and watch the light bulb moment happen. Haha. He just never clicked, I guess. I knew a guy that was an amazing bartender. He'd get random BS drink names all the time and he'd make them perfectly. Can I get a sexy mosquito? Sure. What color? Pink. I can do pink. Combines random here you go. It's good. Yeah, I know. Just like last time. It was always hilarious. I always thought it was funny to order something fairly well known. Old fashioned. I've never heard of that one before. What is it? I swear to God I once had this exchange at a sushi place. Me. Could I get a rum and coke? Owner. A what? Me. Rum and coke. The owner looks at me confused. I grab a drinks menu and pointing at it. Me. Rum and Coca-Cola. Owner. With a confused expression. I see. 10 minutes passes, and the owner returns with a pint glass half full of rum, and a bottle of coke. Owner. Okay, now what? Doing everything I could to keep a straight face, I poured some of the coke into the glass, while this guy watched intently. Was tending bar at my local pub. Loads of old boys used to come in and get properly razzled. One day, I am polishing glasses and they'd been day drinking and it was around 7 PM. I hear this almighty crash and turn around. One of them has fallen off their bar stool. Total silence. Then one guy just loudly declares, "Didn't spill a drop." The whole pub erupts with laughter. Guy who fell off still stands up, tips his hat, and went home. This will probably get lost and it's not something weird I heard but definitely the most impactful. It was a bank holiday shift but I think it was the Sunday. So everyone had partied themselves out over the weekend and the Sunday wasn't quiet but it was quiet enough that you could have a customer on your station all night. This older guy comes in. As soon as he walks through the door he starts looking round the room. Taking pictures and looking like he's being nosy. I think it's a bit odd but I do work in a really cool bar so it's to be expected. He comes to my station and normal conversation starts. How's your night? What have you been up to? Where are you from? Etc. We get onto the topic that he's a gambler and a bit of a con man. I'm super into it as I love things like that. Seems pretty legit. He's showing cars he's had. Starts having small fun bets with people around not for money but just for fun and laughs. We form a good rapport. I've made him a drink that he's never had called a Slagavulin. It's a French martini but replace the vodka with Lagavulin. Blasphemous but effing great. After a while he starts talking in a regretful way. How he screwed people over. He's wasted his life. Been a bit of a dick and a not nice character. I think he's cool. Has interesting stories. Made my night entertaining and has entertained others around him so I let him know. I don't know about his past but from what I've seen he's an interesting dude and is alright by me. I remembered him for a while as being one of my favorite and most interesting customers in the 6 years that I had been a bartender and did think how he was getting on as he wasn't from round here. Fast forward about half a year. He comes in so I greet him and he straight away asks for the drink I made him that night. Sure enough I make it. Serve it and shake his hand. He holds onto my hand with both of his and says, "I'm so glad you're in tonight. I was really hoping I'd see you." I thought he was just being nice until I realized he was starting to well up, which is when he said something along the lines of, "You saved my life. That night I came in I was going to end my life. I came in for one drink to work up the courage and you stopped me from doing that. You listened to me and enjoyed it and I'm so thankful. Thank you. Thank you. I can't thank you enough. I really mean it. I do. And that's one of the most impactful moments I've ever had on my life. TLDR, stop someone from taking their own life without knowing. Just by talking with them." His toe was in my A. Red Foreman has entered the chat. Count yourself lucky it's just a toe, Eric. Next time it'll be my whole foot in your A. And they were roommates. Bartending at a strip club. I'd have guys ask me to get them girls every other night. Like, "Here's $200. Which one of these dancers will F me?" None. Dude, Allison totally would. But I'm not telling anyone. Lots of genitalia talk at the one bar I worked at that was more men networking doing business drinks. The weirdest was these two guys who sat at the bar instead of a table and tried to kick me out by asking if I can leave the bar area because they want to have a private conversation. How about no? I'm polishing glasses for the evening rush for a convention and I'm not standing in the middle of the effing room. I said I'll go stand at the far end of my bar and polish there. Man 1. Her CCH has a rank smell. Tried all kinds of creams and stuff. She's going to the doctor. Man 2. That's fine. Reason not to eat it. Man 1. I still F it. At least whatever yeast happening there makes it slippery. I just have to shower or smell like rotting fish. Man 2. That's effing gross dude. Man 1. F you dude. I wonder what it is. I wanted to say it's probably trichomoniasis, but also horrified that he was still having sex with her and probably contributing to making it even worse and causing some BV issues. That poor woman. This was actually after I had clocked out and sat down at the other side of the bar for my shifty. An older couple I had served earlier had come back. Bar was right next to a theater, so we'd usually serve the same customers twice on show nights. And got dinner and were talking about what they'd ordered. She says she got the shrimp dish, and that apparently didn't sit well with her husband as he just started unloading on her in a way that hurt my coworker, and I just shocked. Ordering the Cameron Zel Diablo was apparently enough for him to start griping about taking care of their granddaughter because his wife's daughter was hooked on meth and unable to do so herself. Long story short, she says, you know what, why don't you walk back to the Airbnb and I'm going to drive home. He left. She paid and told us this was their first night out in about a year and she had been thinking of divorcing him, and that conversation made her mind up. Watched a marriage dissolve over dinner pretty much. That happened to me one time. Couple had been quietly arguing all night. Husband looks at wife and says, you know what? I don't want to be married to you anymore. And he got up and left. She came back in a couple nights later and left a rather large tip to apologize for all the awkwardness. She felt the need to tell me that he had indeed left her and she was thrilled. She became a regular after that. Bartending on a slow night like 15 years ago. These two guys, one a regular, talking about the past and keeping their voices low. The regular says how he shot some guy on his street in like the 70s and just came back in the house and hid the gun in his recliner. Said when the cops were going door to door asking questions, he just said he didn't know or hear anything. I was always hearing crazy sh cause I just kept to myself unless a customer was looking to talk. And like a previous bartender stated, we hear it all. Yes, we do know all about the drugs. I always wondered if that victim died in that incident. But just a few short years after I overheard that convo, the regular died a painful death. Maybe deserved. I occasionally work as a casino bartender and we will sometimes host the Marine Corps Ball. They get rowdy and have a good time. But it's at the very end that you start seeing grown men cry. They start talking about their experiences during service with each other. The worst stories I ever overheard were from vets who served during the Vietnam War. It must have been terrible. Former bartender. There were quite a few regulars I was fond of, but there was one in particular that I couldn't let my guard down around. He was off in some way and I immediately didn't trust him. Slightly older than middle age. He introduces himself and I get his drink. As you do. And after a bit he starts on about his life. Wife left him near a decade ago with 2 little ones to raise on his own. Must have been rough. I say, yeah, but I've worked hard and done right by my kids. Well, cheers to that. Over time I hear him tell the same story the same way to several others, most who had heard it many times before. One evening he comes in later than usual. Hi, how are you doing? I say, though I can tell he is in a foul mood. No harm. Happens to the best of us. He sits near enough to the well with another gent I didn't see in there much. Other gents seemed to be having lady troubles and shifty regular had all the wrong answers. In a hushed and angry tone he said he took care of his own problem 10 years ago and made sure no one would ever find the bee. Well, that escalated quickly. WHAT. I witnessed a complete relationship between 2 women over the course of one night. They met early in the night. They were clearly into each other. Very flirty. They danced and drank the night away. They started making out and then disappeared for some time. Next time I saw them they were at each other's throats. No clue what happened, but it ended with one saying, "I never want to see you again." Then stormed out of the bar. After that night I never saw either of them again. They just speedrun the entire relationship. Break up any %WR. That is the lesbian way. If they had made it back to one's house and made it through breakfast the next morning without a disagreement, they'd probably lived together for 30 years. 30-something girl telling a 50-something dude that she'll blow him for a beer. Hey, some women do that for free. This entrepreneur was up a beer. So who's the real blower? Yeah, I mean sucker. Wait, do I take the roofie or does she take the roofie? FFS. Please tell me you told him to take it. You take it, but it's actually a suppository. First place. 2 girls were drunk as hell, dancing on a mahogany high table, really thick beamed and heavy. The table begins wobbling and one girl leaps off. Table topples over but her friend has her hand clasped around the edge of the table to hold onto it. The table lands with its full weight, including her own weight, on top of her hand, clipping the first joints of her index and ring finger clean off. My colleague acts quickly and picks up the detached index and ring finger and throws them into our ice machine to preserve them until an ambulance arrives. Manager proceeds to scold colleague, cause she's now rendered us entirely unable to serve any more drinks for the night and the ice machine now has to be cleaned. Second place. We've had a long night, a shift from 6 PM to 7 AM. Everyone's completely trashed from all the work, music and follow-up cleaning. We wanna go home. Before we head out, we sit down for a beer and rant about how miserable the previous night was. We finish our beer and we pull aside our drapes covering the front door window and what do we see? Some poor guy leaning against the window. He's got his shirt off and 2 or 3 gnarly puncture wounds on his upper body. Someone jabbed him with a broken bottle. Someone promptly exclaims ARHF. We're gonna have to clean that up, aren't we? And we laugh it off. Seconds later the police fortunately rolls up to help the poor guy. They tap the bloodied window and they beckon us outside. They'll want us to testimony what we've seen and an audible sigh can be heard among all of the remaining bar staff. We're not going home yet. It wasn't until I got home, went to sleep and took shower that I realized just how much of a dick reaction we'd all had to poor guy getting stabbed. Sometimes when you work stupid long shifts in violent cesspools that kind of thing gets a little normalized. You need a sense of humor about it to just cope enough to come into work again. Not saying that this behavior of getting all stabby is good, just being able to not let it affect you too much is beneficial to your psychological survival. In my old line of work in hotels you'd see some pretty messed up stuff. I had a room where 2 guys had fed a girl to the point where the walls had blood and crap sprayed up the wall. They all left, checked out with a smile. We're looking at the room like, well, someone had a good night then. That's one of the tamer things TBH. Still, can't forget that awful smell. Guy by himself. Should I make it a double? Same guy by himself. Yeah, I think you should. Yes you should. Other Barry. Yes you should. Now that's just funny. This is me. I only realized how much when I had a new date over to my place for the first time. I was cooking him supper and doing my usual hum around and comment on all the things I'm doing. And he was like, are you muttering under your breath about me? And I had to embarrassingly say no, I'm talking to the food. Since someone suggested narcissism, I want to defend the guy. It wasn't accusatory, he just likes teasing. And so do I. It's cute and we laugh a lot. No need to worry about me. If someone showed narcissism I'd run very far. Very fast. Ex-bartender. But my first day on my first bartending gig I was making drinks for another customer and a gentleman I had recently served fell off his bar stool onto the ground. Just the loudest sound, the weight of a body falling on the ground. I swung around and it took me a sec to see the guy on the ground. This was a rather decent sized busy local pub and it was during dinner time, so people just started freaking out. I ran around the bar to the man and I had my co-worker call 911 while I, for your information, fully trained in CPR, first aid for years, tried to see what I could do to help. It took moments to figure out he was having stroke symptoms and he basically died in my arms. It was absolutely awful way to start a lot of things. It was a shock, even more due to how others reacted. No one helped, instead we had people dine and ash, people mad that the poor guy collapsed and ruined their dinner, as one couple yelled at me while I'm trying to help this poor guy. Just awful stuff. I found out later he was a regular. He literally had only recently come in for a nightcap from work, which he did frequently. Only had a couple sips of his gin and tonic. I'll never forget it. Used to work in hell, an Applebee's, and a man at the bar passed out due to his blood pressure meds mixing with booze. He cracked his head open on the way down and blood was just everywhere. So I'm calling 911. A hostess is trying to keep his wife calm, and a server is attending to the gentleman, basically just applying pressure to his head. He was breathing. As all this chaos is happening, A lady at a bar table starts yelling at me because they haven't been greeted yet. She said, "I know there's a lot going on, but that's no reason to give us bad service." I had no words. I walked away from her before I lost my job. You can't fix that level of selfishness. How people can have no sense of empathy and a simultaneously bulbous sense of entitlement is just infuriating. Funny to hear this happened at Applebee's. My family and I were waiting for a table and my dad collapsed and died in front of not just all his kids, but the entire restaurant. Everyone was in such a state of shock it almost took a moment for people to start helping out. Rip Dad. Too many to count. AMD. I've only been at it like 3.5 years. I've seen We Should See Other People converse, awkward Tinder meetups, regulars who come in with a different girl every time, a regular whose wife I know come and W someone else, another regular come in looking her husband, who was with someone else earlier that day. I got a couple now that I adore, but she is always wearing a very fancy but obvious submissive collar. I lost count of how many men my dad's agent up will ask me for my number. My most awkward to this day though was a couple who literally followed me from one bar to the next when I changed jobs, and then asked me to watch their dog for a sec while they went outside. Turns out they were breaking up after 10 years together. I still saw them each after then, but never on the same day, like they decided ahead of time who got me when. It was worse than when my parents were separated. LMAO. Don't know if this is common, but was sitting at a bar with a band. It was noisy and crowded. Some girl comes up next to where I was sitting and tells the bartender, "Excuse me, but I just saw that guy customer right there put something in that girl's drink." I didn't see the guy she pointed to. Bartender turns around and said something, I suspect a code word to somebody, and bam. Immediately all the lights go on. The manager steps on stage, stops the band, and makes the following announcement. "Attention, we have a report that someone in this room possibly drugged a young lady's drink. We request that all women here immediately put down your drink and don't take another sip. We will replace your drink for free. If you are that young lady, we will notify you when you come to the bar. If anyone is feeling sick or weak, please let us know." Wow. Lights stayed on. Band remained off for a long time. Maybe an hour. Cheers from the crowd and nobody complained. Don't know what the guy did because I didn't know which guy it was. That place rocks. The craziest was when a man ordered a filet well done and refused to have it butterflied. That's like a 30-minute cook time. He ate it with ketchup. The second was two older guys celebrating one of them getting out of jail. Over the course of the night I learned that he was arrested for DUI when he was parked beside train tracks. The other guy asked what he did with the crack rocks that he shoved in his A. Didn't get to hear the answer, and that he was lucky he hadn't been caught hauling the gas cans to his business partner's house. So we used to have this regular that would come in with his wife every Tuesday, and he'd always tip decent, and then he'd come in with his younger hotter neighbor the next day and tip real well. We could always hear him saying crap like "I'll leave my wife for you," etc. She was a regular as well and constantly flirting with other guys, and she brought in her own men in on occasion. I had a regular himself once. He was on a bunch of meds and came in to drink. His divorce finalized and he was a mess. He shat his pants, proceeded to pay up, left a change, came back, and wanted to drink again. We had a guy faint and fall off a high chair. He'd run a marathon and instead of water, he drank beer. Had to call 911 and all that stuff. He was okay. I've heard some crazy shit too, but it's hard to remember it all.